What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you getting information right now?
Hot sauce.
Hot sauce in my bag, Swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now listen, I
yes.
just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people.
Okay. Is it working?
But we got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
The year was 1964 and race riots gripped the country. As America tried to break loose of the chains of slavery, Jim Crow, and its racist ideals. It was also up against one of the most pivotal presidential elections the young democracy had ever faced. But like every year, the black vote would determine which candidate ended up at the White House and which one ended up in the doghouse. One man tried to warn us of the duplicitous nature of politicians and to be very careful on who we vote for.
Who taught you, please, who taught you to hate the texture of your hair?
This video, we will explore Malcolm X's powerful ballot or the bullet speech and the demands he laid down 60 years ago. And with presidential elections right around the corner, you need to watch this video. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Widely regarded as one of the 100 greatest speeches of the 20th century, the ballot or the bullet is considered Malcolm's greatest speech. The great minister suggested that in 1964, black Americans had an ultimatum between voting in their best interest in order to get freedom from the oppressive acts of America or get their freedom by any means necessary, including no longer being passive about the violence and corruption that had been inflicted upon them for over a century, pointing his ire at who he deemed the biggest perpetrator, the U.S. government. Let's give you a little more context of the current time. The year was 1964. America was still reeling from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. But no one's rights hung in the balance more than black Americans, many of whom believed JFK's civil rights bill would die along with him. His backed civil rights bill proposed a ban on discrimination based on race, religion, sex, or national origin. Fortunately, the bill was championed by President Kennedy's predecessor, Lyndon B. Johnson. Now it would be easy to proclaim President Johnson as some hero and friend of African Americans. But by historical accounts, he too was an avowed racist. But he knew that by passing legislation to help black people, it would help carry him to victory in that year's upcoming election. This type of duplicitous tactics will be covered in Malcolm X's ballot or the bullet speech. Malcolm takes aim at the Democratic Party when he says, "The Democrats are nothing but Dixiecrats, and the father of them all is sitting in the White House." Ouch. The Dixiecrats were a short-lived organization that believed in protecting states' rights and were proponents of maintaining racial segregation. Dixiecrats were mostly Southern Democrats who splintered from the Democratic Party after President Harry Truman ordered military integration and other rights to address civil rights in regard to African Americans. The symbol for the Dixiecrats was the Confederate battle flag. Even though up to that point, Democrats were political supporters of civil rights for black Americans, they also housed most of its opponents. In 1948, as President Harry Truman backed a civil rights bill that would integrate the federal workplace, one of its biggest detractors was none other than a senator from Texas named Lyndon B. Johnson. He used a congressional procedure known as filibustering. A filibuster is a loosely defined term for action designed to prolong debate and delay or prevent a vote on a bill. And before he became president, Lyndon B. Johnson was a great filibuster against civil rights. Malcolm's point was there was no need to tie yourself to any of these politicians because they are doing for what's in their best interest. And he believed black Americans should too.
I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted.
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing.
1964 was also a rocky year for the minister. After the assassination of President Kennedy, Malcolm gave his infamous quote, "The president's death was nothing more than a case of the chickens coming home to roost." This caused irreparable damage between him and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his role among the Nation of Islam. By the spring of 1964, Malcolm had officially announced his split with the nation. Malcolm gave the ballot or the bullet speech twice, April 3, 1964, at the Corey Methodist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, and the second being on April 12, 1964, at the King Solomon Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan. One of the biggest takeaways from his speech was his insistence on black nationalism, over every other difference among black people, especially religion. Historically, black Americans have been devout followers of the Christian faith, mainly in the sect of Methodist and Baptist. The predominance of Christianity among black Americans can be attributed to several factors. During the transatlantic slave trade, many slaveholders used Christianity and the Bible as a tool of control, manipulating scriptures in order to reaffirm the brutality of their acts and condemn the captives for even considering rebellion. However, many enslaved people found spiritual solace and a sense of community in Christian teachings. This led to the formation of black churches on and off plantations. In many instances, church became the only place slaveholders and white Americans would allow black Americans to congregate in peace. These churches became central to black communities, providing not only spiritual guidance, but also social support and a platform for activism. Of course, Malcolm was very educated and even sympathized with the plight of African Americans and their indoctrination into the Christian faith, and felt there was no need to try to convert anyone, but only to convince them that black nationalism is the true path. Malcolm X's conception of black nationalism was a multifaceted ideology that emphasized the empowerment, self-reliance, and unity of all black people, particularly African Americans. Black nationalism was often misconstrued by mass media by claiming it to be a form of black superiority. However, black nationalism was about black people loving themselves and their people first, but not solely. Malcolm X's definition of black nationalism was centered on the principles of self-determination, economic independence, political autonomy, cultural reclamation, militancy and self-defense, unity, and a critical stance against integrationist ideals. These principles aim to empower black people to achieve true liberation and justice in the face of systemic racism and oppression. His ideas were dynamic and continued to evolve throughout his life, reflecting his growing understanding of the global context of racial struggle. Malcolm X advocated for black people to take control of their own destiny. He emphasized the importance of self-respect and self-worth, encouraging African Americans to be proud of their heritage and identity. In the speech, he hammers that point several times. A key aspect of black nationalism for Malcolm X was the economic empowerment of black communities. He urged black people to support black-owned businesses, create their own economic institutions, and build wealth within their communities. This was seen as essential for achieving true independence and reducing reliance on a system that oppressed them. One of the key points of the speech is Malcolm believed black people in America not only suffer political oppression, but also economic exploitation. A key moment came when he said, "The economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we should own and operate and control the economy of our community." He continues, "You can't open up a black store in a white community. A white man won't even patronize you, and he's not wrong. He got sense enough to look out for himself, and it is you who don't have sense enough to look out for yourself." Malcolm points out that those who make black people feel guilty about black nationalism are hypocrites because they themselves practice nationalism among their own group. One of the main focal points of black nationalism, and the ballot portion of the speech, was Malcolm's belief in the necessity of political independence. He called for black people to establish their own political institutions and leaders who would represent their interests authentically and fight against systemic oppression. He often criticized the mainstream political system for failing to address the needs of African Americans. He opens this speech speaking to the fact that you don't see or hear from politicians until election time. Whether it's every 2 or every 4 years, historically, the black citizens have often felt ignored by its elected officials until it's time to garner their votes. Malcolm believed these politicians come into black communities with false promises that only feed the frustrations of the community, leading to the black community pledging allegiance to one political party or another.
And this will only serve to make matters worse. I'm no politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American, and got sense enough to know it. I'm one of the 22 million black victims of the Democrats, one of the 22 million black victims of the Republicans, and one of the 22 million black victims of Americanism.
One of the most memorable moments in the speech comes when Malcolm says, "I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American. I'm one of the 22 million black victims of the Democrats, one of the 22 million black victims of the Republicans, and one of the 22 million black victims of Americanism." Malcolm continues to point out black Americans' first choice at the ballot should be for what's best for black people, not what's best for a political party. Now let's talk about the bullet aspects of the speech. We circle back to the relationship with Black Americans and Christianity. A mainstay throughout every interpretation of the gospel is nonviolence. During the 20th century, particularly during the Civil Rights Movement, Black churches played a crucial role. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., who was a Baptist minister, used Christian teachings to advocate for civil rights and social justice. The church was a place of organization, inspiration, and resilience against oppression. Martin Luther King's rhetoric centered around civil disobedience and nonviolence. Under Dr. King's leadership, protests included sit-ins and not responding to acts of violence. However, Malcolm X endorsed a more militant stance. He advocated for the right to self-defense against racial aggression and was known for his statement, "by any means necessary." These differing points of views were addressed throughout the speech.
As long as you got a sit-down philosophy, you'll have a sit-down thought pattern. And as long as you think that old sit-down thought, you'll be in some kind of sit-down action. They'll have you sitting in everywhere.
Malcolm detested the passive responses in the face of racial oppression. In this speech, he criticized the sit-ins, claiming, "You got a sit-down philosophy," in regards to the highly publicized sit-in protests of the civil rights movement. He continues, "Think of the image of someone sitting. An old woman can sit, an old man can sit, a chump can sit, a coward can sit. Well, you and I have been sitting long enough, and it's time today for us to start doing some standing." Even though Malcolm X differed in approaches with his contemporaries, he stressed the importance of unity among Black people worldwide. As much as he detested nonviolence and sit-ins, he agreed that their end goal was the same as his. Even though they differed in religious practices, they all shared the same goal.
Whether you are a Christian or a Muslim or a nationalist, we all have the same problem. They don't hang you because you're a Baptist, they hang you because you're Black. They don't attack me because I'm a Muslim, they attack me because I'm Black.
He saw the struggle of African Americans as part of a larger global fight against colonialism and imperialism. He often spoke about the need for solidarity with people of African descent across the diaspora. Minister Malcolm acknowledged the works of other civil rights advocates like Martin Luther King Jr. and Adam Clayton Powell. Throughout the speech, Malcolm X continued to highlight the significance of the Black vote and political participation as crucial tools for African Americans to effect change. He urges Black people to demand liberty, freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody, and reminded everyone that this is a revolution, and to prepare because no revolution in history comes without bloodshed. Malcolm X also warned that if African Americans continued to be denied their rights, they might be forced to resort to more extreme measures. The bullet symbolized the potential for violent resistance if peaceful efforts for justice and equality failed. This was not a call to immediate violence, but a stark reminder of the desperation and determination of the oppressed. Malcolm warned his people to be wary of white liberals and don't look to anyone to save them. He encouraged a do-it-yourself philosophy. The ballot or the bullet is a powerful call to action, urging African Americans to take control of their political and economic future by any means necessary. Malcolm X's speech remains a critical and inspiring message about the importance of self-determination, political participation, and the need for a more assertive approach in the fight for civil rights and social justice. Please be sure to check out the speech in its entirety by clicking the link in our description. It's always the perfect time to be reminded of your power.